Chapter 6. The Story of Afghanistan.
The story of Afghanistan, currently facing death from American and NATO bombings, is very peculiar. In 1978, People's Democratic Party came to power and went in for democratic reforms on secular lines. The following year, this government was overthrown by conservative elements. Soviet Russia rushed its army to bring the previous rule back to power in Afghanistan. America decided to promote the most fundamentalist sections of rebels like Osama bin Laden and the fundamentalist outfit called Taliban and provided them military and financial help to overthrow the Russian army.
And that brought in the rule of Taliban, which was nurtured by the US through the conduit of Pakistan. During the Afghan war, the US did practically everything to violate the unwritten and written rules of international behavior.
In Iraq, on the pretext of restoring the freedom of Amir of Kuwait, which had been annexed by Saddam Hussein into Iraq as its 23rd state in 1990, US launched a massive attack on Iraq with aim and purpose of restoring the feudal rule in Kuwait, through which the US is able to control the oil taps of Kuwait.
In the ensuing aggression of US, nearly 2 lakh people died and later 0.5 million succumbed to death due to the sanctions imposed on Iraq, which stopped even the supply of medicines, baby food and other essential items. Pakistan was the product of the British colonial policy of divide and rule. It quickly came under the grip of feudal's military mullah complex. US backed the Pakistan rulers in all their internal repression of democracy.
Bangladesh, erstwhile East Pakistan, broke away from Pakistan in 1971 as a result of Pakistani rulers' anti-people policies. Ever since, Pakistan has been struggling to restore democracy in some way. In Malaysia and Indonesia, which are predominantly Islamic nations, there is a good effort to nurture democracy despite its limitations. So what kind of democracy US wants to promote? It should be understood that the US and its Western allies want only subservient democratic governments in the rest of the world, especially in the Muslim world. The much touted democracy fails here if forces inimical to the US are elected to power, as in Algeria in January 1991 and Palestine January 2006, and on many occasions in Turkey. In Pakistan and Egypt, military dictatorships in the garb of democratic rule are fully supported by the US. The US support and the largesse will be withdrawn the minute these countries changed their pro-Western policies.
So you mean to say that in the countries with Muslim majority populations there have been efforts to bring in democracy? The imperialists have crushed most of these efforts in order to control the oil wealth and strategic locations of the region.
Most of the Islamic nations are post-colonial states, caught up with local limitations and foreign pressures which hinder their march comfortably towards democracy.
Despite these limitations, the ones away from the oil zone have been more successful in planting the seeds of democracy in their societies since they face less foreign, mainly American pressure. Wherever the colonial hold and the restrictions are there, the feudal relations and undemocratic systems are promoted and sustained by the imperialist countries.
The imperialist countries promote the fundamentalist elements in the society if these are ready to play according to the Western powers' game. So the imperialist countries first ensure that democratic transformation should not take place in these countries as it goes against their material interests. It is more difficult to control democratic governments which are accountable to the people and parliaments.
In the second step, the imperialist countries blame that these countries do not have a democratic setup due to Islam. It serves a double purpose to them. They can launch the general anti-Islam brigade to sustain their control in these regions. Can we say that religions emerged in periods of time when democratic institutions did not exist? But religions do not hinder democracy. For example, there is a concept of society rather state in Islam.
As per some interpretation of Islam, the basic task of the Muslim Ummah is to build a moral society based on good and negation of evil.
The unity of Muslims is possible only if they remain basically a religious community engaged in building a just society,
which has no element of zulm, oppression and injustice, though there may be different ways of approaching the truth. I know that Islam is in no way opposed to individual freedoms. It, for one, doesn't recognize a priestly class, and the individual is expected to follow what he or she thinks is the true path. Why do people believe that amongst religions, Islam is the one which gives rise to fundamentalism? It is opposed to democracy and individual freedoms? It is necessary to define the term fundamentalism first. It is basically a Christian term which is used in two senses. The Orthodox believers use it in the sense of going back to the fundamentals of religion. Here, the emphasis is on the original scripture of religion. The second meaning pertains to the use of religion for political goals of the dominant section of society. In this sense, selectively culled out parts of scriptures or practices which are against human rights and equality of weaker sections are implemented to suppress the libertarian aspirations of these sections. Here, we are using the term in its second sense, that is, the political misuse of religion.